And by having a road that's offset, there are minimum requirements for the offsetting intersections. By producing this western private road at a minimum distance to satisfy that offset requirement, we don't know exactly what happens to the existing home and whether or not you can create a legal lot given the separation between the two intersections.
What is that setback?
The petitioners have not brought to us that solution for us to evaluate. So
And that's not under consideration right now. That's a staff discussion that any applicant can have if they have a different idea or proposal.
Where is Price Road in relation to this property?
It's not directly across, but it is fairly close.
it's just close enough to complicate things. Right here is Price Road.
Okay. Okay, so it's down, okay.
It's right at the corner, and you need at least 150 feet separation between driveways, or between intersections, which I'm assuming would fall somewhere in here. What we don't know is whether or not then that resulting lot north of it could be maintained as a legal lot. We haven't seen any documents for us to evaluate in that regard.
Well, in reality, they don't care about Nagawicca Road. They have a legal lot on the new road. The new road will have the amount of frontage.
But we can't create a second, we cannot reduce the existing home to a non-conforming lot.
Yeah. So we need to keep our
But it would be on the street.
conversations, we need to keep our conversations to the action that's in
All
front of
right,
us.
and I want to go
Okay,
back
I understand.
to the ordinance situation. As you continue to make the minimum lots widths wider and wider to the bigger zoning, R1, R2, R3, does it make sense to keep saying, well, minimum lot width is going to be what you're going to have? And it may not make sense as you keep getting bigger and bigger lots. Do you really need a 200-foot flag stem to make it appropriate? I mean, what's magical about the 200? I could definitely see if you had a lot that was 100, how do you put a flag lot in there? You're really going to, you'd have to put the house right behind it. There's no other way. If you're was 150, right? But at 200, it's like you don't need all that for our situation, and I just wanted to put the bar at 90 or lot width, whatever is the smaller, and it would make sense. It seems appropriate.
Well, there's a difference between what you think makes sense and what the code says, right?
I'm saying that the code doesn't say that right now. I understand that.
All right, would somebody like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion. I'll make a motion to deny on that it doesn't meet the ordinance.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any additional discussion?
Yes, I would state at this point that, as I did at the last hearing or meeting that I attended in September, when I brought a motion to approve the certified survey map, which did not get past my stage. I expressed at that time concern and explained that I would be opposed to denial because it was inconsistent with the spirit of the ordinance pertaining to density. Flag lots were prohibited except where there was no other alternative. The applicant was 25 feet short of the minimum requirement on a substantial lot. The request was reasonable and made sense in this case, and I've heard further evidence presented here. It's noteworthy that the issue of the alternative that's been raised today was not raised in the same way back in September. And based upon what I've seen here, the purpose of this ordinance is to lower the density, and these property owners the property owner has done a significant due diligence in presenting their case and investing their time, energy, and effort to do what's right for them as residents of the city of Delafield, which we should honor and promote and secure. What I'm concerned about is the slippery slope of denial. I don't know what else a person has to do to present with equity and fairness like these individuals have. Otherwise, you're going to use as precedent something that is prohibitive without an exception. In other words, in the language of the law, it becomes a shall mandatory language, you shall not have a flag lot, as opposed to you may under certain circumstances, which is permissive language. And at this point, I'm not convinced that this is a mandatory language. I'm not convinced that there is no exception, no rule. This isn't wiping out an ordinance. It's applying fairness to a specific set of circumstances. I would not view it as precedent for any other individual case. It has to come on and rise or fall on its own merit. And I think in this particular case, it has merit. There are 28 people in that residential area that support them. This is what you want in the city, to be supportive of each other and to support each other for good reason in a deliberate process that's rational and makes sense. And you're not doing things to act out of will and not judgment, not be arbitrary or capricious. And here I feel their position should not present a slippery slope that nobody can ever get an exception to this rule. So I would vote against that motion. I'm opposed to it. And I would want them to know that you've been heard, and whatever the commission decides to do today is based upon their good faith and their decision-making and their experience. But I want you to know that I'm opposed to this for the right reasons. And I encourage you.
Hey, none of that.
So thank you.
Alrighty. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Opposed.
I oppose.
You oppose?
Yeah.
It carries. All right. We'll move on to the next item, which is 6B, DLC 0804982001, 2980 Golf Court, Delafield, owner applicant, Delafield LLC. Applicant seeks approval of an amended general development conditional use development standards relating to total green space and recommend to common council the same. Oh. Sorry. I took you out of order. Sorry. We're actually going to do DELC's.
They got to come back
I'm
and do
going to
it.
say you're out of order.
07870816115 Milwaukee Street.
There we go.
Is that applicant here? 615 Milwaukee Street.
Isn't that them?
Seeing they're not here, we'll kick them to the next planning commission meeting.
Well, we had thoroughly discussed this last month. I think this is just a kind of a perfunctory cleaning house of issues that the planning commission had already laid out.
Okay?
You know, we can still put it off to the next month,
Does the
however.
commission feel comfortable? Laura, you had the most concerns. Are you okay with us
Yeah,
voting on this?
I thought that we approved it last time.
What's this one?
Well, we did, but I had stopped the plan commission approving it because we needed the landlord to sign on to
This
it.
basically confirms
And
that
he
took
did?
place.
He did, I've
He
got
did?
that in writing, and I think this is something that the plan commission should consider approving.
All right, I'll make a motion to approve
Good.
business plan of operation and building sign on 615 Milwaukee Street.
Is there a second?
Second?
All right, thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Passes. All right. Now, De La Soda LLC.
No.
Am I missing it
New
again?
business.
Oh, sorry about
No.
that.
12 Milwaukee.
I must
Milwaukee
want to get
Street.
to that topic for some reason. All right, new business, 6A, DLC 07970850001, 1712 Milwaukee Street. Delafield owner applicant Grand Oak LLC. Applicant seeks consideration to approve rezoning for an R6 parcel to R4 and recommend to common council of the same. Come on up. Name and address.
Nancy Tegeter, 1533 Milwaukee Street.
Thomas Tegeter, 1533 Milwaukee Street.
You want to give us a little overview?
Well, we're just here to talk about changing the zone from R6 to R4 for our plans to build a duplex
All right. Roger, you have anything to add?
The only thing I have to add is that it's in my professional opinion that this is a worthy consideration. This piece of property has the unfortunate distinction of being identified as an R6. It matches the zoning to the east. However, with an R6 development on here, as this body has experienced in the past, you can't really achieve that allowable density and have a reasonable building. Downsizing this or downzoning this from R6 to R4 is actually compatible with the other residential lots in immediate proximity to the west and to the south. And therefore, I think it's well in the city's interest to allow this rezoning so that this site can be redeveloped into a property that I think can all be proud of rather than the delinquent status that it exists today. Previously, Mr. Sadowski stepped forward just to remind us all that he has an adverse possession claim. I wanted to share with the Planning Commission, I think we discussed this last month as well. The attorney verifies that the amount of area that would be involved in the adverse possession claim would not have an impact on the developability of this site and is really a non-issue. My recommendation to you is approval and recommend to council.
I think I asked when you were here last time, you're aware of that legal action and you're aware of the extremely unique.
I checked with Waukesha County court system. There is no legal action.
Oh, okay.
Just threat of.
Gotcha, okay. Well, if you weren't, you are now.
Well, we have,
Okay.
we had verbally offered the property to them in question, and then also in writing through our attorney, and hadn't heard anything.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
so-
that's expresses an awareness.
Yes, yes.
And the unique, characteristics of the lot with the hockey stick shape and how the shoreline works and all that stuff, you're very familiar.
Yes.
I like the plan you propose is what you're going to put there if this is approved.
Yes.
Very close to that?
Yeah, I mean, it will depend on elevation and everything.
All right.
That's why we did not have a full drawing made yet until we
Very
knew.
nice.
I think
Thank you.
it almost looked, whatever, I think it fit in real nicely.
Thank you.
We'll get another kick at the can.
I know, and it's not what we're approving here, but
This is not,
Just for the zoning.
And
This is not a
frankly, on
conditional
its own merits, based on the one or two presentations we've had to try to develop this property, the R6 doesn't seem to fit. This is a good call anyways, to drop this to a two resident parcel, in my opinion. So I'll make a motion to approve the zoning change as presented, and as there was no objection in public hearing as well.
Second. Oh, you're first.
Second.
Jim's first.
All right, any further?
That includes a recommendation to the.
And a recommendation to council the same.
Okay,
Thank you, Sally. Any discussion?
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
So, seeing
don't
none,
look at
all
them.
in
Thank
favor,
you.
say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions passes.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks, good
again.
luck.
damn, and we just,
We look forward to seeing you again.
We've been waiting for this.
and we just approved that new zoning map, now we've
No, Sally.
They're not coming, it's taking forever.
Okay, now apparently my favorite topic of the night. 6C, DLC 0804982001, 2980 Golf
What?
Court, Delafield, Delasoda LLC. Actually, we're doing B. We're doing B. Amend the general development conditional use development standards relating to total green space and recommend to the common council of the same. So, while there's many things to talk about for this application, let's keep our discussion and questions, related to the actual action, which is amended the development conditional use standards as it relates to green space and potentially recommend to the common council. Go ahead. I mean, you gave us a great overview before. Do you have anything to add?
Well, thank you, Planning Commission. I'm still Brian Randall, representing the developer and the property owner. With me, as I introduced earlier, Jen Santilli of Chick-fil-A is here. We are certainly more prepared to answer questions, I think, than give another presentation. But again, we did have the full slideshow. Also, from our intro slide, John Thorson, who is responsible for marketing the property. He is here this evening. Chuck Wallace wasn't here in November, but he couldn't make it tonight. Send his regrets. And Deb Tarnow, our civil engineer, is also here to the extent maybe a site plan, a stormwater question may come up, or anything related to the landscaping. She's the one that provided that to me today. We also have that on a board in back, but I think actually the color version that was on the screen is a little more clear. So
Yeah, that's
with
good.
that, and I don't know if Roger needs to give his staff report, but we did read everything. We are working on the conditions, or at least the comments from the city engineer, as well as the city planner, and we would ask that the Plan Commission follow the recommendations that are in there. I don't think, among the options that have been previously identified, amending the ordinances for citywide application, I don't think that's a good solution. Really, in this instance, as we've said before, the modification to this 25-year-old standard seems to be the best fit for the entire, all the interests that are involved, both the existing uses, the proposed use, what the city's trying to achieve, the fact that we're able to accommodate stormwater and still provide a value and a quality development at that location. So again, I don't want to give an elongated presentation, but certainly if there are questions about the design of the building as it might relate to this modification and why we might meet the burden that you'd look for in that, Jen can speak to that. We have a materials board. We can talk stormwater. We can talk anything else that there might be. Jen, did you want to?
We want to stick to the issue at hand, which is.
Understood. And again, the Plan Commission's had a number of questions, I think, rooted in that, but at base level, we're looking for the 14,000 square foot modification to the full green space standard. And I think Roger's staff report did a good job of just giving basic numbers. Rather than 65-35, it's now, and even though we're close on that, it's 34.25. I think there's just a little
Yeah,
wiggle room there
actually,
to use a round number. If you
I gave you enough to maybe put in one more parking space if necessary, but just to kind of cover our bases if the surveying comes up with a curb line that's 6 inches off or something like that. But the intent is to allow them the overage and reduce that required green space from 35% to 34.25%. We, as a Plan Commission, have the ability to make modifications to the development standards of a planned unit development after the general development plan is approved, and as in this instance, as time changes and people's expectations change, the Plan Commission can, by resolution, make changes to the specific development standards. Well, your amount of green space, your amount of impervious surface, your minimum lot size, your whatever the identified criteria in that list of development standards in the planned unit development is, we have the ability to make that change, approve it by resolution. However, staff has, in this instance, recommended that we do it by conducting a public hearing and recommending it to council as well, just to make sure all the bases are covered and there's concurrence at council level as well. What they're asking for is that consideration in regards to the green space. I'm a bit disappointed that there hasn't been much change to the site plan, but understandably, they're not going to respond with a change to the site plan unless they know that this project is going forward. Because there are, as I pointed out, some instances where they could decrease the impervious area, increase the green space, and come closer to satisfying the requirement for 35%. But they've elected not to do that, and understandably, they have their program established and want the Planning Commission to consider making these minor considerations. I think it's something worth your evaluation. A big part of this is the traffic issues on Gulf Road. I want to make sure that is a separate conversation, but just unique to this project. I would encourage you to consider the reduction in the required green space. I have specifically put this on the agenda this evening for 2 action items, the first of which is a change in the development standards, allowing it to be reduced from 35 to 34.25%. I would like a separate action for that, as well as then a second action approving the general development plan in its presented state. Now, switching on to the development plan proper. There are a number of issues with it, none of which are so onerous that they cannot be overcome. The engineer in reviewing had 95 comments, which is It seems to be an awful lot, but keep in mind that they are at this point preparing for the SIP, which has already been submitted and will be back on our agenda next month. So they're going through this with a fine-tooth comb for something that's at this stage supposed to be a conceptual general development plan. Of those 95 items, they're all technical. There's none of them that are going to have sufficient impact to the site plan that would warrant our reconsideration of the plan if the engineering were to be revised and implemented as recommended. In regards to my planning perspective, the property is still overparked. They have 120 parking spaces. They're only required to have 86. Well, 86 is a minimum requirement. And I think we're all aware that Chick-fil-A has, and rightly so, an understanding that they have a higher traffic volume in and out and therefore a need for more parking. But they haven't presented any justification other than that they have a high traffic volume requirement. They were asked to identify the turning radii to make sure that we can get a semi in and out, and more importantly, that the fire district can get in and out with their vehicles. They have reviewed it. They have approved it. They've also approved the canopy height on the south side of the building on the drive-through, so they're comfortable that they can get all the way around it. In regards to pedestrian access, they have accommodated the stairs in connection to the path that goes up the hill to the upper level of the subdivision. What is missing, however, is a link to the north, to the east, to the Holiday Inn. I think we want to have that connection. I'll guarantee you, if they think very much about it, Chick-fil-A would like to have that connection too, so that patrons of the hotel can come and have a chicken sandwich. There are 2 retaining walls on site, one of which surrounds the east border of the tree preservation area. It is right at the line, and it's about 3 to 4 foot height. Well, with the 3 to 4 foot height, you also need to have geofabric built back into the hillside, which means you're going to have topographic disruption within the zone, within that tree zone. I think the engineer needs to take a look at that and either bring that height of that retaining wall back closer to natural grade, or move the retaining wall closer to the building out of the tree zone, so that it takes into account not only the actual stacked block, but also that fabric, that geofabric that goes back into the hillside.
Roger?
Yes.
I'd like to correct you on that.
Okay.
The fabric will go on the Chick-fil-A drive-through.
You're going to have to come up and give us your name.
So your drive is above the tree zone.
That's correct. I'm Deborah Tarno. I work with Key Engineering Group, the design engineer for this project. And Roger, respectfully, I just wish to clarify that the retaining wall, the Chick-fil-A drive-through area is higher in elevation than the tree, so the geofabric that
Goes
you're
the other
referring
direction.
to goes the other direction.
Okay. I think in the specific implementation plan, we'll want to make sure that you're not crowding that line even with the block, because if you are, then we're going to want aeration tubing under there for the root zone. So I think let's just make sure it's outside the boundary. The other retaining wall, Deb, while you are here, the retaining wall to the north has an impact on a number of trees that are on the hillside there. There are 440 caliber inches of trees that would be impacted by the implementation of the retaining wall there. The city has implemented, when it comes to root zone preservation, we have a policy that it's 1 foot per caliber inch offset. Otherwise, we consider that there's impact to the tree. Unfortunately, some of the trees, well, fortunately in their existing condition, but unfortunately, some of those trees are 30-inch trees that are falling 12 feet away from the wall. So there will be a significant impact to the root zones, and therefore we have to consider those trees as lost. So there's a maximum, or there's an established 440 caliber inches. That means that equates to $60,000, a little bit more than $60,000 of mitigation fee that will be incorporated into the developer's agreement, unless there's some other solution that is sought through this body's approval. In regards to trees, there are trees that are planted atop of the underground storage facility. And I think, Deb, you'll have to work with the forester to make sure that we can indeed have a reasonable growing condition for those trees. Maybe even switch them out to lower story trees. They don't need to be canopy trees. And move maybe more canopy trees around the perimeter. Back to the retaining wall up here in the northwest corner. We're actually doubling up. We've got a retaining wall, and then we have a dumpster screen built to hide the dumpster, where I think you can use the retaining wall as part of the screen, the back wall and the side wall for the dumpster, and actually curtail the amount of architecture and the screening requirements around that dumpster. On a related note, we do not have architectural plans for dumpster screens, which are required. The lighting plan does not address properly the light shed down here on the south side. We have light shed that crosses the property line that's too great. And more importantly, the parking field, the ratios were not calculated properly to accommodate an even light shed throughout the entire parking lot. Those are minor issues that can be resolved by the lighting engineer, and I'll be glad to work with them on it. More importantly, when it comes to architecture, as I mentioned, we have dumpster screening, but what we do not have is on the Chick-fil-A building what I think is adequate screening for rooftop elements. The fact that you'll be able to look right down on top of these buildings, the multi-tenant building does have a pretty substantial parapet and is also further away from the interstate, but particularly on the Chick-fil-A building, I think we're going to need louvered screens that hide the rooftop elements. The only other issue I have is there's a monument sign proposed down here.
A what?
A monument sign.
Okay.
Sign in the ground. with
Sign
the
on the
name
ground,
it, yep.
which we don't have any designs for, no understanding of what it is that is being proposed there. Although it's a rather extensive list, I don't think any of these are issues that can't be overcome. And I'd like to think that they could be modified and corrected before we have our SIP consideration next month. And that is, of course, assuming that you agree to the modification to the 35% this evening.
How many lots are there in this 47-acre development?
How many lots?
Yep. Well, this is a separate lot, right?
Maybe 12.
Yeah, that's what I was going to guess.
Interestingly, though, 10 of those 12 lots are all by one owner.
Now. But it's changed, some of them have changed hands over the 25 years. And that, that's why having the conditional use development here, it allows you some flexibility if you need it. I mean, it's hard to foresee everything that's going to happen over a 25-year period, right? And that's one of the benefits of having it set up the way that it is. It affords us some flexibility to be able to address that through the process.
I guess my issue is there's 12 lots and it all comes down to the last lot and they have to bear the burden of 11 other people. And I don't find that very fair. Yeah, that's a problem on our part, allowing that to happen. Each lot should have taken care of their own. So.
I know, I agree in some stance to that because I sat out there for years and listened to the green space.
Be
Kept
whittled
getting
away.
pushed aside.
And I understand that they went and bought the Dixon property, but
Yeah.
they should have bought a little bit more.
And during that approval process, the entirety of the development was owned by one entity, so
Yes.
they had that flexibility.
Right. I have two questions. One is, if they bring down the parking, how much green space will we pick up?
Well, if they satisfied the minimum parking, dropping it to 86 spaces, I think they generate, 9,800 square feet. So that's 9,800 of the 14,000 that they're short on the green space.
It still drops how much they would need. Okay.
Consider
That
it.
and I have a question about if the roundabout does go, gets passed, what about the green space that we lose having that?
I don't know that we will lose that much. They're lane widening, but we're also creating a pretty substantial island in the middle of it.
Right.
So I think that's probably an
Or is
offset.
that middle going to have something on it? Is
It'll
Green.
be green.
It'll be green.
I think that's
Middle will
pretty
be
much a
green.
trade-off.
All right.
And then some of the dividers going up the road will also, not all of them, but some of that will create green space in between with plantings. So they're little pieces, right? Nothing of any real significance, but we're trying to stay with that theme of, we've done a really good job of keeping this area green, and we want to make sure we continue to do that.
The only other really big concern I have is for the slope. It is a huge slope, and I don't know what the highest elevation is on that slope.
The slope, the north side where it goes up to the
Yes.
other,
Right, because it's all oak trees.
yeah.
And I want to make sure every single one of them is protected. Because when I first moved here, there were 3,000 people in Delafield. We're over 7 now. And most of Delafield was oak trees and hickory trees. And over the years, I keep seeing them disappear. We just approved a lot on Kettle Court that when I went up there, was almost all solid oak trees, gone. So I really want to make sure that this area is protected because it's something that people see from the freeway when they get off, to see this beautiful area of all these oak trees in this green space. Not only that, it holds that slope. Because I don't want to see it undercut, because if you start undercutting, you could destabilize that slope somewhat, and you'll start getting erosion, and you'll have problems up above in those buildings. I don't care for the staircase in it because I could see somebody's kid falling and getting severely injured, or even an older person such as I. And in the wintertime, it would have to be salted, and I know where that salt's going to wind up. It's going to wind up near the roots of those trees. So those are the things that I have real issues with.
Will those trees be evaluated for their quality?
I'm sorry?
Yes. If you read
I mean, a lot of people
report.
around here talk about trees.
Right.
Well, a tree that's basically dead but standing is
It's in
not
the
a,
report.
it's not a tree. Are all the trees on that hill of good quality?
They are all, most of them are all oak trees. And I want
But are they
those
of
to
good
remain.
quality?
And in his report, engineers even specifies trying to save as many as you can.
Right. But has the arborist looked at them?
I'm sure he will.
Well, eventually, the arborist will look at them, but the information that was provided for the tree survey, the species has not changed. The species has always been the same species. The majority of them, the quality, the larger trees are oaks. There is a lot of small garbage stuff in there. It's not all quality trees, but it's only the quality trees that make up the 440 inches.
So I've got a couple questions. One, I was asked by somebody in the absence of people at our public hearing, I had a couple of people talk to me over the last couple of weeks. There's concern that that we might not get a Chick-fil-A at the end of this. Is this one and the same? Is this development resulting in a Chick-fil-A? Not that we're dead set on that, it's just that's part of the equation. In other words, this is contractual between you guys, this development occurs and a Chick-fil-A is getting put in. Is
If
that,
the referendum passes.
if all the other moving
lawyer
parts get
grabbed it.
accomplished, right?
Gotta have the referendum.
I'll start with that answer. We have a signed lease with Chick-fil-A.
Okay.
And we've been working very closely with them, but the design of their building and a lot of those details came from Chick-fil-A. We are on the developer master side of things, doing the overall site planning and the multi-tenant building. But also, both buildings do work together. In other words, we do need both as we go through this process to be approved, because with the way the overall finances work, one by itself doesn't work for this site. So we are proposing both together, and we do have a signed deal with Chick-fil-A, but I'll let Jen Santilli speak to their commitment or their interest in the area and why they are looking forward to coming and building that location.
Brian, with the SIP submittal that's already been made, wasn't there a business plan of operation application in that for Chick-fil-A? Maybe Jen knows.
I don't think
I
we
don't
submitted
recall.
that as of
Okay.
yet. I thought that with, as fast as we've been moving this through, and while we've provided a lot of details with their operations, I don't believe that's been filed
Okay.
as of yet. We were expecting that would be kind of like some of the signage that we know that we have to deal with, a follow-up item. But certainly if there are questions on operational issues, we'd be happy to address those now or at the next plan commission as well.
I had a couple of questions. In the last time we were here, I addressed two of them that you actually had mentioned. One was the park, and then the other was the architecture. And the architecture that's been provided in the materials I have, it's one type of building. I'm assuming that there are other types of architecture for buildings that Chick-fil-A does, or is it just this architecture?
For one, on the record, Jennifer Santelli with Chick-fil-A Inc., 5200 Buffington Road, Atlanta, Georgia, 30349. We really tried to work with a particular prototype because it's got like all of our most recent innovations and how we want to set the operator up for success in this location. The prototype that we originally submitted is the prototype that goes with that particular design size and style. And so what we've done is looked at the area architecture and really tried to enhance and work in with the shed roofs and the vertical and horizontal articulations to really fit within the architecture that we're seeing in Delafield.
So would it be correct then, it's mainly suitable to the particular area and where it's going to be located?
Yes, sir, this one would be.
But you do have different prototypes that you have for other places, right?
Yes and no. So we've gone through a prototype. You know, our prototype continues to evolve, and so some of the older stores here in the greater Milwaukee area are an older prototype that we don't do anymore. And so this is our latest and greatest prototype, and then we enhanced that elevation to be more in keeping with what we see in Delafield. And so that is something that we're doing only in Delafield. That's something particular to this building in this location.
So this isn't going to be the one that's in Pewaukee?
The one in Pewaukee is a different building type, and it is a little bit different. Pewaukee had some other requests of us. So this is it is definitely a little like Pewaukee, but it's a different building size and shape than the Pewaukee store.
So this is the only one that we'll have a chance to look at, to evaluate, the one that's up there on the screen.
Yeah, that's correct, because that's the only site. Well, it's not that one.
Yeah, it's
It's that one.
That one.
Yes, this is the only building that will fit on this site with the size. And if I can just take one moment to go back to the parking, Chick-fil-A really intends for the site to be as successful as it can be. And with that, we always want the store to be set up for success with about 70 to 75 parking spaces. And particularly in this location, with having another multi-tenant building that we don't know the occupants of, we want to make sure that they're also set up for success. We don't want to hog all the parking and leave them with nothing to support their own. And also, a lot of times, like we'll be in an overall shopping center where there's a lot of opportunity to cross park. And there's not that here since we're down at the end of the cul-de-sac. And so that's really driving the parking count up a little higher because we don't have that ability to park other places. Like sometimes if we're in an out parcel in a mall, we'll have our employees park like somewhere on the mall property and have a little less parking on our actual site. But like I said, that's not really an option at this location. So we're hopeful to have as much parking as we can to contribute to the success of both buildings.
So right now, you don't have a tenant lined up for that building yet? You don't have a building, but you don't have any plan for what type of tenant?
I'll take that one because that's a De La Soda question or an answer, and the answer is correct. We don't have any tenants to announce. We, though, have the building, which is being designed for what the market really is looking for with optional sizes of the tenant spaces, and certainly we'll be working with Chick-fil-A to make sure the uses are overall compatible.
So we can probably assume it's not going to be Culver's.
Probably a good assumption.
As far as the park that I mentioned the last time, and you just, I think you presented landscape design of what it was. I haven't seen it yet, but I just saw it up on the screen. I assume we'll be able to get more of an explanation at the next meeting about that a little bit in depth, because as I told you before, the park is, the idea, the charm of Delafield is keep parks and trails and those kind of natural boundaries in front of the public, whether it's in the form of bridges, streams, waterfalls, whatever it is. Most importantly, in that area where we got a lot of, impervious stuff, we need to make sure that that's still the focus on this design and landscape.
Sure, and so as I mentioned, the plan that's on the screen right now did come in just today, and we hadn't even had a chance to provide it to Roger, but we'll give the electronic version that can be zoomed in and reviewed, and that's also part of with the follow-up comments that we'll do with the next step with the specific implementation plan. Certainly our approach, and we hope it's starting to be evident there with your question, we look at it as a park-like setting, and balancing, of course, we're right at the I-94 off-ramp and the very busy Highway 83. So what we're trying to do is grab elements of what might be in a park. We don't think we can achieve a park at this particular corner, but create the park-like setting of the balance of certainly what green space, of visual relief, stormwater, pervious surface, all of that can provide at this location, with also key accents, as I mentioned in my first presentation, with respect to around where the pedestrian seating area will be, the outdoor patio location, and of course the parking lot islands and other areas that we can have the perimeters around the building. So that's what we're striving for, but those details will be in the plan, and we'll be working with Roger on what other questions there might be.
Because I really think it's a mutuality of interest, because people where it's located will see it, and it'll be attractive for them to come and shop and so forth. But you see it as you come in off that freeway. And the other part is, just so you know, Park and Recreation Commission on Monday did pass a motion, again, reinforcing our support of protecting that Grand Oak. And so it's, every commission here is protecting the Grand Oak. So I just want to let you know there's another commission that's protecting the Grand Oak. So you're on notice.
I have a couple.
Champion, it's champion.
Or champion,
Oak,
sorry.
Champion oak to be protected.
Couple comments. I concur, and I failed to do so, but I concur with Dave on the idea that as the last piece of the development, that I think it's very reasonable that we're looking at 0.75% of green space being deferred, based on how well everything's gone with the rest of it, how nice the trees and all that have matured over time. I don't think people, if you think back to when that development was put in versus now, I think it's done better than we may have anticipated. So that's not a lot to ask, in my opinion. Couple things I do like. I do want to see the pedestrian connectivity. Whatever you can do to get up to the lot above you. I'm sure that it'll be designed in a way that it's not a hazard. But also connect to the Holiday Inn Express as a traveler. I've walked through hip-high grass and dress slacks to get to a restaurant that's right there, when I'm in a hotel, and there's no walk. So I think that's a reasonable thing to include. Also, however you work with construction or planning, we commonly bank parking spaces based on the tentative tenants that you have there in the other building. You may want to think about how you'd stage or phase parking based on occupancy and figure out where there could be banked parking spaces to leave green space, even though you're maybe getting a waiver for all of it. If you follow what I'm saying, maybe don't put in 14 spots right away until you know how the next building's going to be developed. Maybe it's going to be a unique place that only has 2 employees. It uses up the whole building and pays you more rent than you figured. But a couple other things, like
can only hope, right?
like roof screening. It's the sight lines to see the roof of those buildings, especially where the Chick-fil-A is going, is challenging to get a glimpse of those roofs as you're driving by on the expressway. It's not like Perkins where you're seeing it, or some of the other, the Ace across the street. So I encourage staff and you to work together to put money where the best results are, because there may be a spot where if there wasn't a bridge there, you'd see it, but you're kind of tucked down in the valley there, and so you won't have all the elevations that everyone else has there. The other one is, with respect to the trees, when you talk about declaring a 30-inch caliper tree dead because we've intruded on 25% of its root space, I'd like to see some negotiation with city as we move forward to invest in those trees as opposed to writing them off and putting a couple of trees elsewhere in the city. I'd like to see restoration efforts and some sort of credit maybe be applied toward whatever we can do to bolster the possibility of danger to the oak that's there and the other ones on the hill. I'd like to see what's there maintained, and as opposed to cutting a check for trees elsewhere to put in a fund that we use sporadically. I'd love to see it just be used on that property. So those are some of the comments I have, but I'd like to make a motion to
Two motions.
Two motions. Well, we'll pass one at a time, right?
Yeah.
I'll make a motion to approve the amended general development conditional use development standards to reduce the total green space as presented.
And recommend to council.
And recommend to council.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passes?
Also make a motion to approve the amended general development plan and recommend to council of the same.
Contingent upon resolution of the engineering issue?
Absolutely contingent upon the short list of 90-something, whatever else comes up between now and the SAP.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passes.
Step one.
Question about step 1.5. The last sentence of Roger's staff report references referral to the Public Works Committee. Does the Plan Commission need to take action, or should we just work with staff to schedule our next appearance with that committee?
The engineer is already planning on you being there, so what do you guys think? Is that a good idea?
That's part of the resolving the list, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, let's do that.
We put it on our timetable. March 6th is what we're expecting, so. Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm back on the straight and narrow here, and going to 6D. DLC 0793049408 Main Street, Delafield, owner John Tomasini? Tomasini. Applicant MSI General. Applicant seeks preliminary feedback regarding an attached single-family residential development in the CDB2 district. If you could give us your names and your addresses, that'd be great.
Sure. Good evening. John Coots with MSI General, P.O. Box 7, Oconomowoc, Wisconsin. And I have with me Andrea Hunley, also with MSI General.
What is this?
Y'all waiting on me?
Yes.
All right. This is a piece of property that is immediately west of us here. It's at the convergence of Main Street and Wells Street. This is immediately north across the street from the Hawks Inn. This is immediately west of the Wells Street station. This is an existing, or what was, a residential parcel. What is being proposed now is the development of attached single-family row house type of development. This is a CBD2 property. CBD2 property does allow for residential, but it requires approval by conditional use, as well as CBD1. The only difference is with CBD1 is that you're required to have commercial on the ground floor. In CBD2, you don't have that requirement. CBD2 is predominantly residential uses, but it's intended to be a transitional zone. It's described that way in the zoning ordinance because it was created as what was anticipated to be conversion of single-family homes to other businesses 30 years ago when that was the going trend. We have somewhat adopted a new understanding of CBD2 because there's obviously been more new development rather than transition from single-family to commercial. And one of those elements is the possibility of multifamily. Well, CBD2 does not have specific references to regulate the multifamily, although it allows it as a use. So what we've done with a number of other projects in the city is we've applied the R6 standards to the multifamily development. And in this particular instance, we've worked with the petitioner to help them come up with a solution that satisfies all of those bulk requirements. You have essentially a building that is proposed, could be approved, and a building permit given tomorrow if they had their conditional use in line. So they're here this evening to make a presentation, a preliminary presentation, to ask you to consider their use, give them some preliminary feedback, and schedule a public hearing so they can pursue this as a conditional use. We would hold that public hearing next month. Anything that you suggest this evening for changes or requested information has to be provided by the applicant before the publication date of the public notice. So you'll have less a week about, to turn things around if there's changes that come out of the meeting tonight. My recommendation to you is that this is a property that I think this is a use that is befitting this property. My only suggestion is that, and I put examples of it in the packet, is that it was presented to us originally as a all brick masonry looking building, which I think is beautiful and will fit our aesthetic perfectly. It's now proposed with lap siding. Well, it's
Hardy plank.
hardy plank lap siding. Or maybe not hardy
Yeah,
plank,
and
but
LP.
Yeah, and it's a mix. There's masonry
Yeah.
as well. We didn't pull all the masonry off, so.
So with that, questions
I
or
have a
feedback?
question. Are these going to be condominiums?
They could
Well,
be.
ask.
Are they going to be condos or rentals?
They're going to be condos. Per the density and the advice of the city, they need to be condos.
Okay.
You're almost at full
Is it a-
capacity for rentals in the city.
Is it
Over.
a mix of, 2, 3 bedrooms?
They're a mix per the R6 requirements. So there's 3 2-bedroom units and 1 1-bedroom unit, and that's per the allowable units in relation to the green space on the site. So we've worked hard with Roger and the city staff to make sure that it meets all the R6 requirements per kind of his introduction.
This proposal is fully compliant.
Yeah. I like the looks of the building. I think it's very in keeping with downtown, with all the gabled roofs and the dormers and all that. I think it's a handsome building.
Yeah, I have to agree. The aesthetics, I think they blend in well for the area.
Yeah.
I don't.
So
You don't?
I have a question.
I think it looks more like Wells Street condos that we put in where we lost a lot of those gable type architectural styles and things that help set the buildings off in downtown Delafield to blend. It has more of a modern look than it has a historical look in my mind. And by adding some brick in there, you definitely get some of that, for lack of a better term, 20s, 30s type Lang look than we do with this. Now, if this was, on a residential neighborhood or something, I think it would be fine. I'm not saying that the architecture is bad. It's quality architecture. I just don't think it blends in with the buildings that we have there. If anything, it blends in with the Wells Street Tavern, which buildings, or what's the name of that? Why am I not remembering it?
Rivers?
No.
Wells Street Station.
Wells Street
Wells Street
Station.
Station.
Wells Street Station.
So could I comment on that?
Yeah.
The Wells Street Station has a flat roof. It has
Yeah.
these have all gabled roofs. So it doesn't really match it at all architecturally. So I'm a little confused by the statement on matching the Wells Street apartment buildings that are right next door. We've purposefully not matched their architecture.
Yeah.
And there's going to be a brick, up the lower course of the building, and then around the back side, the whole lower level where the garages are, is going to be all brick.
Yeah.
We have some brick fireplaces, on both
Yeah.
ends too. So the goal was to kind of make it look historic, like it fits in, but kind of a modern twist or blend so that people aren't,
We have a picture of the Wells Street station with, again, flat roofs, very square. Our building has gables all the way around, and it fits the Lang architecture downtown. That was the
Well,
purpose of
Lane's
our.
building's right across from Wall Street Tavern.
Correct.
And it's very reminiscent of what you have with the
Yeah.
gable roofs and the dormers.
We don't have a copy of
So
that.
And your one side with, where there is the exposed brick definitely looks better than the other side that has none.
There will be a little bit, because the first level is set up quite a few feet off the street, kind of similar to that picture on the right there with the red. So there will be some brick on the front there. I forget how many feet, but up
Okay,
several feet.
but these aren't your building.
No,
No, these are just inspirational ideas that we took architecture from as we designed this building.
I think that they've done a fine job in replicating this architecture. However, I think that the disconnect perhaps is, first of all, these are all masonry. They don't have the lap siding appearance, but even the masonry that is proposed, it's great. You know, it's not coming through on the perspectives as masonry if you look at their pictures.
Yeah, no, I could see it on the bottom. It's kind of like Lang's building across the street where it has the brick on the bottom.
We did a pretty extensive survey of buildings in Delafield, and there's lap siding predominantly on most of them.
you know, the Wall Street Tavern building.
Yeah.
Yes.
it's-
I mean, this is kind of a similar feel,
Right.
like they're gonna have a brick course on the bottom with some small windows for the lower level,
There's
and
your
then siding
dormers.
up above.
And then we've also worked with a couple of local high-end home builders to look at what's marketable in Delafield. What are people looking for? You know, they're looking for low maintenance, they're looking for a little bit more modern. And so it's always a challenge architecturally to make everybody happy. But
True.
We did work hard to have a building here that fits in, we felt, you know, with the Delafield architecture and also would appeal and be filled, you know, right away.
Well, the other thing to look at is the tone of the brick that you're using. If you have something that offsets, that pops, it's gonna catch your eye in a pleasing manner, so that might be something to consider.
Sure.
Particularly on this facade, my preference would be to have some more brick coming up the front, as opposed to what's gonna be more or less hidden behind the bushes.
Yeah, was there thought of breaking it apart a little bit, maybe the inset portion in the middle, having a brick face on that or something, you know, just an idea to break it apart to make it almost look like two different buildings. Just like I agree with the brick, and I don't know, what catches my eye are the banks of windows. I like the north elevation better than the south, for whatever it's worth. And the four big tall tower banks of windows on the from Wells Street are the ones that kind of catch my eye as kind of out of place. I'm sure there's a functional, like that elevation looks great in my opinion, and this is just an opinion. It doesn't mean you can't build. But on the other side of the building, the banks of there's 4 windows times 4. Those seem a little like kind of bolted on as opposed to inherent with the architecture. Different question is, are the dormers functional? I mean, are those see-through? Those are, okay, good.
Yep.
And another question is, based on the conditional use, would we be approving a final architectural plan presented to us, or because I know there was an issue specifically with the building next door where there was not one huge change. There was a half a dozen small
changes, yeah.
adjustments that boiled all the character out of the building. It looks like a jail.
Right.
And I want to not recreate that error here, and I just want to make sure that staff is aware as we go through this, and just before the next meeting, if we could have a kind of an overview of how the process goes from approval to the occupancy permit being granted, so we're all aware of it as we go through. But based on what, just so my impression, based on what I thought of the myriad of possibilities for that small piece of property, I'm fairly pleased with what